Arizona Territory,
We need to keep
1887.
moving.
The lowering sun washed the open
The
land in
others are
bands of amber
depending
and
on
burnished
us.
gold, stretching long shadows across the dry reach of the C-Bar W Ranch. Rhea Blackwell stood on the broad veranda of her hacienda, surveying everything she owned with eyes honed as sharp as a freshly whetted blade. At 32, she ruled the largest cattle operation in the territory, a fact that earned her equal measures of admiration and quiet resentment. "The North Pasture herd is moving by morning," said Bram Coulter, her foreman of 5 years. "Creek beds are thinning, but if the monsoons hit early, we'll pull through." Rhea gave a measured nod, her face revealing none of the concern she felt. Drought was a familiar enemy, and she had survived worse. "And the Silver Queen mine?" "Production's up 15% since the new pumps went in." "You were right about that investment." "I usually am," she replied, not with vanity, but with plain certainty. In this country, mistakes cost blood and fortunes. She had paid enough of both. Bram hesitated, shifting in the dust. "There's more, Mrs. Blackwell." She turned fully toward him, reading the strain in his face. "Go on." "Word out of Tucson. Another raid. A stagecoach hauling Southern Pacific payroll. 3 men killed." "Money taken?" "Yes." He lowered his voice. "They're saying it was Talon's band." The name struck like a blow, though her expression did not flinch. 5 years had passed since she last heard it spoken aloud, yet it had never left her thoughts. "The Apache Ghost," Bram added, using the settler's name for the raider. "The Army's doubled the bounty, $5,000 now." "Thank you, Bram." "Have Mace Turner ready the carriage for tomorrow," she said. "I'll attend the Cattlemen's Association meeting in Tucson." "Yes, ma'am. With the raids, will you want an escort?" "Mace and his shotgun will do." Her tone ended the discussion. When Bram left, Rhea eased into one of the carved rocking chairs along the veranda. Alone at last, she closed her eyes and let the memory she kept buried rise. Talon, a name meaning one who moves without sound. She had once spoken it in a whisper, during a moment that never should have existed between a white woman and an Apache man. The wind shifted, carrying sage and dust. Rhea straightened, banishing the thought. Sentiment was a luxury she could not afford. Her husband, Rowan Blackwell, had been dead 6 years, leaving her an empire to defend and expand. His passing had forged her into something harder than the Eastern woman she once was. Few knew Rowan had been more partner than lover, their marriage a practical alliance. Consumption had taken him slowly. She had nursed him through it, earning his trust, and eventually everything he owned. Those who claimed she married for money were not entirely wrong, but they never understood the respect that bound them. "Mrs. Blackwell," came a gentle voice. Isla Mora, her housekeeper, stood at the door. "Dinner is ready, and this just arrived." She offered a telegram on a silver tray. Rhea unfolded it, hands steady. "Urgent. Raid on silver shipment. Federal marshals request your presence at security meeting tomorrow evening. Territorial offices, Tucson. Respectfully, Judge Hollister." Rhea folded the paper. "Thank you, Isla. Have Mace prepare for an early start. We'll leave at first light." That night she sat at her desk with ledgers spread before her. The figures spoke of prosperity earned through calculation and sacrifice. Yet her mind wandered to 5 years earlier, stranded beside a broken wagon wheel on the edge of Apache land. Alone, with Rowan bedridden miles away, she had watched a tall figure emerge from the desert heat. Not an army scout, but a man dressed in Apache tradition. She had reached for her hidden derringer when he spoke, in precise, educated English. "That little gun won't help you much out here, Mrs. Blackwell." He knew her name, And against every lesson fear had taught her, she had not been afraid. Rhea snapped the ledger shut. That memory belonged to another life. Tomorrow she would face the marshals, tighten her defenses, and protect what was hers. If Talon truly had returned to this territory, he would find a woman remade, tempered by years of fighting for her place in a land that showed no mercy. She turned down the lamp and crossed to the window, studying the sweep of land she owned through will and law alike. Moonlight glazed the desert in pale silver, turning the flats and ridges into something unreal. Somewhere beyond that glow walked a man she had known once, briefly and impossibly. Now a raider, an outlaw, a shadow. Just another obstacle, she murmured, drawing the curtains shut. The stagecoach clattered through broken ground, dust boiling behind it as it entered the narrow canyon halfway between the Blackwell Ranch and Tucson. Inside, Rhea Blackwell reviewed her notes for the cattlemen's meeting, immaculate in a tailored travel suit of deep burgundy, chestnut hair pinned neatly beneath a modest hat. Beside her sat Mace Turner, a former slave from Georgia who had followed Rowan Blackwell west after the war and now served as driver and occasional guard. His scarred hands rested on a shotgun, eyes never still. "Canyons trouble me, Miss Rhea," he said low. "Too many places to die." "That's why we've got a man riding high," Rhea answered, meaning the armed guard on top. Even so, unease crawled along her spine. 3 raids had struck this stretch of road in as many months. The coach jolted to a violent stop, nearly pitching her forward. "What in—" she began, but Mace raised a hand. Shouts sounded overhead, then a single gunshot. Silence. "Stay behind me, Miss Rhea," Mace whispered, lifting his shotgun towards the door. The latch was torn open. Sunlight flooded the cramped interior, blinding her for a breath. When her sight cleared, she stared into the muzzle of a rifle held by a man with a bandana masking his face. 2 more stood behind him, armed the same. "Step down, slow," the leader ordered, his accent placing him nowhere familiar. Mace didn't lower his gun. "You best move on," Mace said. "Nothing here worth dying for." "The woman, Rhea Blackwell. She rides with us." The man's dark eyes slid to her. "No one has to die today," the masked man said. "I can't allow that," Mace replied, finger tightening. Rhea laid a steady hand on his arm. "It's all right, Mace. Lower it." "Miss Rhea." "Do it." Her voice left no room to argue. If they meant to kill us, they'd have done it already. Reluctantly, Mace eased the shotgun down. "Wise," the leader said, stepping aside to let her out. Rhea descended with her dignity intact. She took in the scene at a glance. Driver and guard alive, tied and disarmed. 4 riders mounted around the coach, all masked, all armed. "If it's money," she began. "It isn't." The leader motioned, and a horse was brought forward. "You'll ride, Mrs. Blackwell, and if I refuse?" The faint crinkle at his eyes suggested a smile. "You won't." The way he said her name sent a jolt through her. He leaned close, speaking for her alone. "For old time's sake, Rhea, come easy." The ground tilted. Those eyes, she knew them, had carried them through long nights when her empire felt like a cage. "Talon," she breathed. He offered his hand and helped her mount. As they turned away, Rhea called back. "Tell Judge Hollister I've been delayed." Then, softer. "And no heroics." Mace nodded once, understanding. "Don't follow. Don't spill blood." The riders slipped onto a hidden track and vanished into the mountains. Rhea kept her composure. Years of bargaining with hard men had taught her how. She had few advantages now, except one. Her captor was no stranger, but a ghost from her past. a man who had once saved her life, a man she never expected to see again. And if the rumors were true, one of the most wanted outlaws in the territory. As dust settled behind them, civilization fell away mile by mile. The trails narrowed, invisible to untrained eyes, paths known only to those who had called this unforgiving land home for generations. The climb was punishing. Rhea rode in silence, measuring distances, marking landmarks, weighing the men who held her, and the single truth she could not escape. The four men rode with the smooth precision of those long accustomed to staying ahead of pursuit, exchanging short phrases in Apache with the occasional word of English. By late afternoon, they slipped into a concealed canyon, its mouth hidden by a natural barricade of tumbled stone. Beyond it lay a modest camp, no more than 15 souls, men and women, and a few children moving quietly among them. They weren't bandits, Rhea realized. They were families. Talon dismounted first, then offered his hand to help Rhea Blackwell down. His touch was distant, professional, yet unsettlingly familiar. Since the whisper at the stagecoach, he hadn't spoken to her. "You'll stay here," he said at last, indicating a small wickiup, brush, and canvas pulled tight against the wind. "You won't be harmed." "How comforting," Rhea replied evenly, holding his gaze. "And how long do you intend to keep me captive, Talon? Or should I call you the Apache Ghost now?" Something flickered behind his eyes. Regret. Perhaps irony. Only his eyes were visible above the bandana. Then, with a quick motion, he pulled it down. The face beneath was both known and altered. At 34, Talon bore new scars, each a quiet record of survival, but the sharp intelligence in his dark eyes remained untouched. "Call me whatever you like," he said, his voice lower than she remembered. "You'll be released when it's safe." "Safe for whom? You're interfering with federal business. The marshals are expecting me." "I know." He signaled to a young Apache woman nearby. "Mira will see to what you need. Rest. We'll talk later." With that, he turned away. Inside the shelter, Rhea found clean blankets laid over pine boughs, a small water skin, and strips of dried meat. Spare, but sufficient. She sat as Mira slipped away with a shy nod. 5 years. 5 years since the chance meeting at the edge of Apache land. 5 years since 3 days that had quietly reshaped her view of the world. The memories came unbidden. A shattered wagon wheel. Talon appearing through the heat like a mirage. His unexpected help. His surprising education. Mission schooling, he'd told her, before returning to his people. A sudden summer storm that forced them into an abandoned mining shack. 3 days of talk that crossed borders neither had known how to name. He, the son of a chief who studied the white man's ways to shield his people. She, a banker's daughter who married with calculation and found herself ruling a cattle empire she barely understood. 3 days of a fragile, impossible connection spanning 2 colliding worlds. And on the 3rd night, when lines blurred under shared stories and earned respect, one kiss. Tentative. Forbidden. Electric. Full of what might be. A kiss broken by the arrival of an army patrol. A hurried separation. A promise whispered in desperation to meet again. A promise never kept. Rhea had returned to her ailing husband and the weight of growing responsibility. Talon vanished as the army intensified its hunt for the remaining free Apache bands. Months later came rumors of his death in a skirmish. She mourned in silence, burying that brief truth deep within herself as she became the formidable Mrs. Blackwell, respected, feared, immovable. And now he stood alive, changed, no longer only a raider, but the leader of refugees as much as fighters. The flap of the wiki-up stirred her from her thoughts. Talon entered with a tin cup of coffee, offering it without ceremony as he sat across from her. "I expect you have questions." Rhea took the cup, using the moment to steady herself. "Several. Starting with why you abducted the territory's largest taxpayer and employer." A trace of the smile she remembered softened his face. "Still direct. That hasn't changed." "Then answer," she said. "Why?" He inclined his head, respect clear in the gesture. "The meeting you were summoned to, it's a trap. Not by the marshals, but by Darius Holt at Fort Buchanan. He's been hunting my people for months," Talon continued. "You mean your raids on payroll wagons and stagecoaches?" "I mean our efforts to keep our people alive while agents steal the supplies meant for them," he replied evenly, heat burning behind his calm. "Holt learned you were coming. He planned to use you as bait, knowing I've struck your silver shipments before." Rhea studied him, measuring his words against what she knew of the colonel who ruled the fort with an iron hand. Darius Holt's reputation for ruthless handling of what he called Apache problems was well known. Still, Rhea frowned. "Why would he think you'd risk taking me? We crossed paths briefly, years ago. I doubt anyone even knows." Talon held her gaze. "Because 2 months back, one of your foremen caught 2 of my men collecting cached supplies along the north edge of your land. You chose to release them instead of turning them over to the army." Rhea's cup stopped halfway to her lips. "Those were your men." "They told me about a tall woman with eyes like winter rain," Talon said quietly. "She said, 'Tell your leader this is the only mercy I offer.'" "Next time I'll hang thieves myself," Rhea replied, heat rising in her cheeks despite herself. "I didn't know they belonged to you." "Didn't you?" The question lingered, sharp and testing. Before she could answer, shouts broke out beyond the camp. Talon was on his feet at once, hand dropping to the pistol at his side. A young Apache burst through the opening. He spoke fast in his own tongue, just enough for Rhea to grasp the meaning. "How many?" Talon demanded, already moving. "At least 12. Soldiers by the look." Talon turned to Rhea, his expression hardening. "It seems Holt is more resourceful than I expected. Your man Mace Turner must have led them here." "Mace would never," Rhea began, then stopped. "Of course, the guard on the stagecoach. He must have been Holt's man." Talon nodded once. "We move, now." He held out his hand. "Unless you'd rather greet the colonel and explain why you're standing in an Apache camp." She understood at once. Any association with Apache renegades would shatter everything she had built. Rhea took his hand, rising with the composed dignity she wore like armor. "What about your people?" Something flickered in Talon's eyes. Surprise, perhaps respect. "They have a route ready. We've survived worse." Outside, the camp was already in motion. Only essentials were gathered. Shelters came down fast. Children were guided toward a narrow trail at the canyon's far end. Talon led Rhea to 2 waiting horses. "Can you still ride?" he asked, the words echoing another time she had caught him off guard with her skill. "Better than most men in the territory," she said, lifting her skirts and mounting without help. A faint smile touched his mouth. "That I remember." They rode hard, breaking away on a separate trail from the fleeing Obsidian Apache, climbing into higher ground where scattered pines offered cover. Far behind them came the distant sounds of pursuit. "They don't give up easily," Rhea said, when they paused briefly on a rocky rise. "Holt wants more than you," Talon replied, scanning the horizon. "There's a bounty on any Apache found off the reservation. Dead preferred." The bitterness in his voice cut deep. "Is that why you raid?" Rhea asked. "Revenge?" His eyes snapped to hers, dark and fierce. "Survival. When they forced us onto San Carlos, it was a slow execution. Disease, hunger, corruption. I watched children fade while agents sold the food meant to keep them alive. He turned back toward their trail. I raid payroll wagons and supply trains because that money feeds my people. Every dollar buys medicine, food, blankets, smuggled back by those of us still able to fight. This man was not the thoughtful idealist she had met 5 years earlier. That Talon had believed understanding could change things. This one had learned the cost of such hope. "And your education?" she asked softly. "Your dream of being a bridge between our worlds?" Pain flashed across his face. "That world doesn't want bridges, Rhea. It wants obedience or extinction." He checked his rifle with practiced ease. "We keep moving." "There's shelter 2 miles north," he added. "We can make nightfall there." They were mounting again when a rifle cracked. Bark exploded from a tree inches from Talon's head. In the same instant, he yanked Rhea from the saddle, dragging her behind a boulder as more shots rang out. "At least 3 shooters," he said calmly, firing back with measured precision. "Left ridge, about 200 yards. Rhea reached for the derringer hidden in her boot, a habit she'd never broken since her earliest days in the territory. 4 shots won't buy you much," Rhea Blackwell said, repeating his words from years before. Talon glanced at her, surprise and something like respect, flashing in his eyes. "Better than nothing." He pressed his revolver into her hand. "You still know how to use it?" "Point and squeeze," she said, spinning the cylinder to check it. "I've learned a few things since we last met." He gave a brief nod, acknowledging the change. "Hold the left," he said. "I'll circle and hit them from behind. Wait." Rhea caught his arm. "You're risking your life for a woman who stands for everything your people lost. Why?" For a heartbeat, the gunfire and danger fell away as Talon looked at her with an intensity that carried her back 5 years. "You already know why, Rhea Blackwell." Before she could answer, he was gone, moving with the soundless precision that had earned him his name. Alone, she steadied her breathing, focused on the approach he'd marked. When a shadow slid among the rocks, she fired twice, forcing the attacker back. Minutes dragged into hours, then shots cracked from the far side of the ridge, followed by shouts of confusion. Talon had flanked them. The fight ended as suddenly as it began. Silence returned. Wind in the pines, a hawk's distant cry. Rhea waited, tense, revolver raised. He emerged at last, a fresh cut bleeding along his forearm, otherwise untouched. "Army scouts," he said. "An advance group. We need to go before the rest arrive." "Did you kill them?" Rhea asked, her voice steady. "No. 1 wounded. I tied them up." "They'll be found." His eyes met hers. "Does that surprise you? 5 years ago it wouldn't have." She handed back his revolver. "Now I don't know what to expect from the Apache ghost." Something softened in his expression. "I'm still Talon," he said quietly, just with fewer illusions. He nodded towards the horses, miraculously still nearby. "We've got a long ride." As they mounted and pushed deeper into the mountains, Rhea felt the walls she'd built around her heart begin to give. This man, outlaw, enemy to the world she commanded, was still the only one who had ever seen past her armor. Despite reason, despite reputation and empire, a part of her welcomed the dangerous return of feelings she'd buried under desert dust. Night dropped fast in the high country, the cold sharpening as darkness closed in. Talon led her to a small cave hidden behind juniper, its mouth nearly invisible even up close. "We'll be safe here," he said, helping her down. "The army won't search at night, not in terrain like this." Inside, the cave widened into a surprising chamber. Talon moved with practiced ease, lighting a small fire in a stone ring. Flames danced across the walls, revealing neatly stored caches, ammunition, dried food, blankets. "One of your hideouts," Rhea said, removing her hat and loosening her hair. Relief washed over her, easing the headache that had grown since the ambush. Talon nodded, tending the horses before joining her by the fire. "One of many. The mountains remember us, even when others want us erased." He offered jerky and a canteen. They ate in silence, the weight of past and present between them. At last, Rhea spoke. "You said I'd be released when it was safe. When is that?" 2 days, maybe 3, once Holt's men pull back." He studied her across the fire. "Your ranch manager, the former slave, he can handle things." "Mace Turner can manage a week if he has to," she said, surprised by his knowledge. "You've been watching my operation." "I keep track of power in this territory." A trace of his old, dry humor surfaced. "Even those who once shared coffee with me in a mining shack during a storm." The memory loosened something in her. "I thought you were dead," she said softly. "After the campaign against the last free bands, there were reports." "Exaggerated," Talon replied, not without bitterness. He rolled up his sleeve, exposing a puckered scar high on his arm. "A farewell from the 6th Cavalry, before I slipped into Mexico." "Mexico," Rhea Blackwell repeated. "Is that where you've been all this time?" Talon shook his head. "For a while. Then the reservation. I tried to work inside their system." His face hardened. "I watched my cousin die of fever because the agent sold the medicine meant for us. I saw children starve while cattle grazed on land that once fed my people." The restraint in his voice couldn't hide the fire beneath it. This was the moment that had reshaped him, from the thoughtful man she once knew into the leader he had become. "So you chose to take matters into your own hands," Rhea said, not accusing, simply recognizing the truth. "I chose to survive," Talon answered, "to help my people survive." He met her eyes without flinching. "Judge me if you want, Rhea Blackwell. You with your thousands of acres and silver mines, an empire raised on ground where my ancestors hunted for generations." The words cut, but she held her ground. "I don't deny the history, Talon, but what I've built came through work and fair dealing." "Fair?" His laugh carried no humor. "Was it fair when treaties were broken one by one? When our hunting lands became your grazing fields? When our water was diverted for your herds?" Heat crept up her neck. "I didn't make those choices. I wasn't even here when most of it happened." "And yet you benefit every day," Talon said, his tone quiet and unyielding. "Every acre you own, every silver dollar you count. All of it rests on broken promises and stolen ground." They faced each other across the fire, the easy understanding of their first meeting strained by truths neither could escape. Rhea looked away first. "Maybe you're right," she said, surprising them both with her honesty. "But what would you have me do? Walk away from everything I built? Surrender the security I fought for?" Talon studied her for a long moment. "No," he said at last. "I don't expect that. I've learned not to expect the impossible." The weariness in his voice struck her harder than his anger. She remembered the man who once spoke of building bridges, of a future where both worlds could endure. "What happened to you?" she asked softly. "The man I met 5 years ago believed change was possible." He stirred the fire, sparks lifting into the dark. "That man watched his sister die on the reservation because the doctor never came. He buried a nephew barely 6 years old after a cavalry raid on families fleeing sickness at San Carlos." When he looked at her again, grief and resolve shared his gaze. "That man learned that hope doesn't feed children or stop bullets." Rhea felt the weight of his losses. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "Your sympathy fixes nothing," he replied, though his edge had dulled. "No," she agreed. "But understanding might." Silence settled as the fire burned lower. At last, Talon rose to add wood. Firelight traced the hard lines of his face, marks earned through years of struggle. "You've changed too, Rhea Blackwell," he said, sitting again. "The woman I knew was still searching for her place." "Necessity," she said after a moment. "After Rowan Blackwell died, I had to become harder. Certain. A woman alone in this business doesn't get the luxury of doubt." "Your husband," Talon said, nodding. "I heard. Consumption." "That's right." Her hand drifted to the plain gold band she still wore. Not from affection, but as armor against suitors and those who questioned her authority. "He was good in his own way. Our marriage was practical." "Not love, then," Talon said lightly. "Few marriages are," she answered, meeting his gaze. "Rowan needed a capable partner and an heir. I needed freedom from my father's plans, and a chance to build something of my own. We respected each other. That was enough. And after?" A trace of his old teasing returned. "No suitors for the richest widow in the territory?" Her laugh was brief, but real. "More than I care to count," Rhea Blackwell said. "Ranchers, bankers, even a judge or two, all eager to help me manage what Rowan Blackwell left behind." "Which was considerable," Talon noted. "It was a beginning," she corrected. "What exists now, I built." Pride edged her voice, earned through years of risk and relentless effort. The original spread was 10,000 acres. Now the Seabar W covers nearly 50,000, with 3 producing silver mines and the largest breeding operation in the territory. Talon regarded her with renewed interest. "Impressive." "Not everyone appreciates a woman holding that kind of power," he added. "Their appreciation doesn't concern me," Rhea said with a small shrug. "Their respect does, and respect comes from strength and success." "A belief we share," Talon replied. He offered her a blanket from his pack. "You should sleep. Tomorrow will test us." Rhea accepted it, the weight of exhaustion settling in. As she laid her bedroll near the fire, a question she'd carried finally surfaced. "The children in your camp, are any of them yours?" Talon looked up from checking his rifle, surprised. "No, there's been no wife, no children." The unasked question lingered between them, unanswered. "Good night, Talon," she said, turning toward the fire. "Rest well, Rhea Blackwell," he replied, his voice carrying a gentleness she'd nearly forgotten. Dawn broke with the distant thunder of hooves. Talon was moving before the sound fully registered, rifle in hand at the cave mouth. Rhea joined him, having slept in boots and coat out of habit. "Frontier dragoons," he said grimly. 20 riders, maybe more, cutting the valley floor. Rhea followed the dust plume with her eyes. "They're heading northwest, away from us. For now. They'll spread out," Talon said. "Darius Holt is thorough." "What's your plan?" Rhea asked, already packing. "North, deeper into the range, then east toward the reservation line." He erased every trace of their camp with practiced speed. "I have contacts who'll send word to your ranch that you're alive." "And then?" "Then you return to your empire, and I return to mine." His tone was plain, though his eyes said otherwise. "An empire of outlaws and refugees," she said, without malice. "We prefer freedom fighters," he answered, a flash of the dry humor she remembered. They saddled up in a shared silence, the tension easing into the focus of survival. As Talon steadied her mount, his hands lingered a breath at her waist, warmth flaring despite the cold. They moved on, following game trails so faint Rhea would have missed them entirely without him. By midday, they reached a ridge overlooking the territory, mountains rolling into foothills, then the broad sweep of range that included her land. "From here," Talon said, tracking her gaze, "your domain looks smaller." "Still large enough to draw enemies," Rhea replied. "Not just you. Texas cattle barons circling my water rights, mining outfits eyeing the Silver Queen." He studied her anew. "You fight your own war." "Different stakes, perhaps," she said, meeting his eyes. "But yes, we're not as different as you think, Talon. We both protect what's ours, by any means." A rifle cracked. Stone exploded near Talon's horse. The animal reared as more shots followed. "Ambush!" Talon shouted, yanking Rhea from the saddle. They dove behind a fallen log as bark splintered around them. 5, maybe 6 shooters. He returned fire with measured precision. "Not soldiers. Black spur riders by the look." Rhea drew her derringer, scanning for movement. "They tracked us from the cave." A round grazed Talon's shoulder, tearing cloth and skin. He barely reacted, firing again. One attacker fell, tumbling down the rocks with a cry. "We move," Talon said, checking his load. "They're trying to flank from the east." Rhea nodded, her thoughts racing. "The ravine to our right, if we can reach it." "Too open," Talon cut in. "They'd have clean shots the whole way down." Rhea narrowed her eyes, taking in angles and cover. Years of running a ranch in hostile country had sharpened her instincts. "The horses are gone," she said, "but if we draw them west, we might slip north through those pines." Talon looked at her with fresh respect. "What kind of distraction?" Rhea reached into her boot and produced a small silver flask, a gift from a Texas cattle baron with marriage on his mind. "Whiskey," she said, "and your bandana." Understanding clicked. Talon tore a strip from the cloth as Rhea soaked it in whiskey, stuffing it into the flask with a tail left hanging. She pulled a match from a waterproof case. "On my count. 1, 2, 3. She struck the match, lit the soaked cloth, and hurled the makeshift bomb toward dry brush on the western slope. Talon laid down cover fire as the flask shattered, flame racing through brittle growth. Smoke and fire leapt up fast, a sudden wall. Shouts rose from the black spur riders. Using the chaos, Rhea and Talon broke north, low and fast. Bullets still chased them, but smoke ruined aim. They hit the pines and pushed deeper, the sounds of pursuit thinning behind them. Only after they'd put distance between themselves and the ambush did they stop, breathing hard. That, Talon said between breaths, was not taught at mission school. Rhea allowed a thin smile. Nor at Miss Porter's school for young ladies. She nodded to his bleeding shoulder. "We need to tend that." "Later," he said. "We're still exposed." He scanned the woods. "There's a place, 2 miles on, a hidden valley with a spring. We rest there." They went on foot, slower without horses but safer under cover. Talon kept a punishing pace despite the wound. Rhea matched him without complaint, her riding boots earning their keep on the rocks. By late afternoon, they reached the valley. Green and sheltered between stark cliffs, a clear spring spilled over mossed stone into a shallow pool. "It's beautiful," Rhea said softly. "An old Apache refuge," Talon replied, kneeling to drink and splash his face. "Few outsiders know it." "Yet you bring me here," she said, joining him. He met her eyes. "You're not an outsider, Rhea. Not anymore." The words settled between them, an acknowledgement of something neither enemy nor ally. Rhea broke the moment, gesturing to his shoulder. "Let me see that." After a brief pause, Talon nodded and pulled off his shirt. The graze across his shoulder was painful but clean. As she rinsed it, Rhea noticed the map of scars across his torso, each a chapter of survival. "The hunters," she said, working carefully. They wanted you, not me. The Apache ghost brings 5,000, Talon confirmed. Dead or alive. A tidy sum, Rhea said, tearing a strip from her petticoat to bind the wound. About the price of one of my prize bulls. The humor didn't reach his eyes. Rhea's hands stilled. Is that what you think of me? That cattle matter more than lives? Talon sighed, last night's anger easing into something knotted. No, I've watched you. You're fair with your people. Mexican, white, black. You judge by work. Yet you judge me for the land I own, she said, finishing the bandage. I judge the system that stole it, he corrected. You are a complication. A complication, she repeated, tying a neat knot. Is that all I am to you? He turned fully to her, the valley suddenly intimate. What would you rather be, Rhea Blackwell? The question hung, heavy with roads not taken. Before she could answer, Talon stilled, listening. The faint jingle of tack. Muffled hooves. Riders, he whispered. At least 4, maybe more. They slipped beneath an overhanging rock and watched as 6 mounted men appeared at the far end of the valley. Their plain clothes and mismatched weapons marked them as bounty hunters, not soldiers. They're tracking our trail, Talon said grimly. Persistent. $5,000 buys persistence, Rhea Blackwell replied. She studied the riders with a cool, assessing gaze. The man in front, I know him, she added. Vex Calder. He used to track for the army before turning hunter. He's dangerous. Talon shot her a look. You know him? I make it my business to know dangerous men in this territory, she said, echoing his earlier words. Especially those who might threaten what's mine. A risky plan took shape. They don't know I'm with you, she said slowly. They're hunting the Apache ghost, not Rhea Blackwell. Understanding flickered in Talon's eyes. No, he said firmly. Whatever you're thinking. Let me finish, she cut in. I buy you time. You circle wide. If you can, take their horses. It's too dangerous. These men respect money and power, she said evenly, and they fear those who command both. I do. He studied her, torn. Why help me? I took you. I endangered you. She hesitated, the answer tangled in memory and something deeper. Because 5 years ago you taught me to see this land differently, she said at last, and because I'm not ready to watch you die. Before he could answer, she stepped from cover with the easy authority of someone used to command. Her hair had fallen loose, her travel suit was dusty and torn at the hem, but her presence was unmistakable. Vex Calder, she called, her voice carrying across the valley. You're trespassing on Blackwell grazing rights. The riders pulled up short, surprise rippling through them as they recognized the territory's most powerful woman. Calder recovered first, tipping his hat in a gesture just shy of respect. Mrs. Blackwell, he drawled. Didn't expect to see you. We're tracking the Apache ghost. Seen any sign? Rhea approached with measured steps, keeping her distance. I'm surveying potential new range, she lied smoothly. A mountain lion spooked my horse this morning. I've been on foot since. Calder's eyes narrowed. Alone? That seems unlikely for a woman of your standing. My men are checking the western ridge, she replied, without missing a beat. We're to meet here at sundown. She glanced at the lowering sun. They'll be arriving shortly, with rifles. The implication landed. Calder shifted in his saddle, weighing the bounty against the risk and the consequences of crossing Rhea Blackwell. We tracked the Apache and a companion into this valley, he insisted, though his certainty wavered. Then they've moved on, Rhea said dismissively. I'd appreciate an escort back to my men, since you've interrupted my work. As she spoke, she kept the corner of her eye on a shadow slipping from rock to tree, Talon, moving exactly as planned. Calder hesitated, suspicion lingering. "Strange timing," he said, "finding you where we trailed the ghost." "Are you accusing me of consorting with outlaws, Mr. Calder?" Rhea asked coolly. "That would be a serious claim against someone with influence at the territorial governor's office." It worked. Calder's mouth tightened, but he eased back. "No accusation, ma'am. Just doing my job." "As am I," she replied. "Now about that escort." A rifle cracked. Dirt jumped near the horse's hooves. 2 more shots followed, placed to panic without killing. The animals reared, chaos erupting. "Ambush!" someone shouted as pistols cleared leather. Rhea dropped and rolled behind a boulder as bullets tore the air. Talon had created the diversion, but now she was in the middle of it. From cover, she saw him move with ruthless efficiency, using confusion and terrain to his advantage. One hunter went down under a rifle butt, another fell with a shot to the leg. Vex Calder, however, kept his head. Using the turmoil, he slipped behind a rock outcrop and leveled his rifle, clear sightline to Talon's position. As Vex Calder lifted his rifle and settled into his aim, Rhea Blackwell moved without a flicker of doubt. She fired her derringer. The sharp crack was nearly swallowed by the heavier gunfire, but her shot found its mark, grazing Calder's arm, ruining his line, forcing him to scramble for cover. That instant was all Talon needed. He flowed through the fading light like a living shadow, appearing behind Calder with impossible speed. There was a brief, violent struggle. Then Calder crumpled, unconscious from a precise blow. Minutes later, it was finished. 2 black spur riders lay wounded but breathing. The rest were down or gone. Talon gathered rifles and ammunition quickly before moving to Rhea. "That," he said quietly, "was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever seen." Rhea rose, dusting her skirt with as much composure as the moment allowed. "In my experience, the two often travel together." A rare smile crossed Talon's face, softening years of strain for a heartbeat. "You shot Calder." "I'm a better shot than most think," she replied, reloading with practiced ease. "A woman alone learns certain necessities." His expression sobered. "You saved my life, Rhea Blackwell. In my world, that creates a debt." "Consider it repayment," she said, avoiding his eyes, "for helping a stranded woman with a broken wheel 5 years ago." He shook his head. "This was more than that, and you know it." He nodded toward the captured horses. "We should go, before they wake or others arrive." They mounted. Rhea riding side saddle, her torn skirt making it sensible, and felt the shift between them. Captive and captor, ranch owner and outlaw, had blurred into something far more dangerous and difficult to name. They rode in silence as dusk swallowed the mountains. When they finally stopped in a sheltered ravine, the routine of tying horses and building a small, smokeless fire gave them something to do besides think. Only after they ate a sparse meal from the hunter's saddlebags did Talon speak again. "Why did you truly help me today?" he asked, voice low in the dark. "The truth." Rhea stared into the embers, gathering herself. 5 years ago, she began. "After we parted, I went back to being Mrs. Rowan Blackwell, dutiful wife, rising cattle baron. I nursed my husband through consumption. I expanded the ranch. I became who you see now." She lifted her eyes to his, but something changed in those 3 days in that mining shack. Something I could never undo. "What changed?" Talon asked softly. "I saw the world through different eyes," she said. "I saw possibilities I'd never imagined. A man who moved between worlds, understood both, belonged fully to neither." She paused. "A connection I'd never known, not even in marriage." The admission hung between them. Talon's face was unreadable in the firelight. "And now, what do you see when you look at me?" he asked. "Not the hopeful scout, but an outlaw with a price on his head." "I see a man fighting so his people can live," Rhea said steadily. "A leader who risks himself to feed children who aren't his. A warrior who spares when he could kill." She met his gaze. "I see you, Talon. Changed, hardened, still the man who showed kindness when he didn't have to." The space between them seemed to close, years and borders briefly suspended. "And what do you see when you look at me?" she asked, needing the answer. Talon studied her a long moment. "I see strength without cruelty," he said. "Power guided by purpose beyond self." His voice softened. "I see the woman who followed me for 5 years, across deserts, mountains, and the lines between our worlds." The truth of it left her silent. Talon rose, circled the fire, and settled beside her with fluid grace despite his wounded shoulder. "5 years ago," he said quietly, "we were interrupted." Rhea Blackwell's breath caught as Talon reached for her, his fingers brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek. The touch was gentle, deliberate, heavy with everything neither of them had said, with years of restraint, with paths chosen and doors closed. "We still stand on opposite sides of a divide that can't be crossed," she whispered, even as she leaned closer. "Perhaps," Talon murmured, his palm settling against her cheek. "Or perhaps we are the bridge." When their lips met, it was nothing like the hurried, broken kiss of 5 years before. There was no desperation in it, no hesitation either. It carried the weight of time and distance, of lives reshaped by duty and loss, a moment set apart from the world, where they could finally acknowledge what had always been there. At first light, they were already moving. They rode side by side through a land washed gold by sunrise, neither speaking much, as though words might fracture the fragile memory of the night. Talon led them east along game trails and ancient Apache paths, routes that would bring them to the edge of the reservation, and the boundary of what they could share. "There's a trading post 10 miles ahead," he said when they paused to rest the horses. "Iago Serrano. He deals fair with whites and Apache alike. He can get word to your ranch." Rhea nodded, adjusting her torn skirt over the saddle. "Will you keep raiding?" There was no judgment in the question, only realism. Talon's gaze drifted. "Until my people have food, until the government honors its treaties." He looked at her. "We both know that day may never come." "There has to be another way," Rhea said quietly. "Legal challenges, pressure from Washington." "We've tried," Talon replied, not unkindly. "Delegations return with promises and papers. Meanwhile, children starve and die of sickness white doctors could cure." His frustration was aimed not at her, but at the system that had failed him again and again. "What if—" Rhea began, then stopped. "What?" Talon prompted, watching her closely. She chose her words with care. "What if there were a way to help your people without risking your lives in raids? A legitimate arrangement, supplies and medicine moving quietly, reliably, into the reservation." Interest flickered in his eyes, tempered by doubt. "The agents control what comes in. Anything official gets skimmed or sold." "Not if it comes through private channels," Rhea countered. "The Blackwell contracts reach suppliers across the territory. Deliveries can be redirected." "You would risk your name, your business, to help my people?" he asked, genuinely curious. "I would help people in need while protecting my investments," she said evenly. "The raids on silver shipments and payrolls hurt my operations, Talon. This could benefit both sides." A trace of his old smile appeared. "The businesswoman speaks. Always a negotiation with you, Rhea Blackwell." "Life is negotiation," she replied without apology. "And this one could save lives, Apache and white." Talon considered, thoughtful. It would require trust. And a mediator, Rhea said. Serrano. He's respected by both sides. The idea hung between them. Delicate, but real. A possible bridge across a divide they'd long believed uncrossable. Before Talon could answer, distant hoofbeats cut the air. Both turned, alert. A lone rider approached fast from the east. One of yours? Rhea asked, noting Talon's relaxed stance as he recognized the rider. Yes, he said. Ashen. My second. I sent him to check on the families after the army raid. The young Apache warrior reined in sharply, his face grave as he spoke to Talon in their own tongue. Rhea understood enough to catch the meaning and the urgency in his report. The Obsidian Apache families were safe, but another danger had risen in its place. Talon's expression hardened as Ashen finished speaking, his jaw set with a fury held tightly in check. When the young warrior fell silent, Talon turned to Rhea Blackwell and shifted into English. Darius Holt has taken hostages from the reservation, he said flatly. 3 Stone Circle elders, 2 children. He claims they tried to leave without permission. Ashen had already made it clear. They had been dragged from their homes. Holt says that unless I surrender within 3 days, they'll be tried as hostile combatants. Talon didn't need to finish the thought. In this territory, such trials were little more than ceremony before execution or lifelong imprisonment. Rhea had heard enough stories of Holt's campaigns to know his reputation was earned through cruelty. He can't do that, she said, even as she recognized how hollow the words sounded. He already has, Talon replied, urgency tightening his voice. They're being held at Fort Buchanan. Rhea absorbed the information quickly, her mind turning gears as it always did in crisis. This changes everything. He's baiting you, forcing a confrontation on his terms. I know the trap, Talon said, but I won't leave my people to his mercy. The eldest hostage is my father's brother, a healer. The children are his grandchildren. The truth landed hard. These weren't abstract casualties. They were blood. Family. Perhaps the last Talon had left. Rhea made her decision without hesitation. I'm coming with you. Talon stared at her. No. This isn't about silver shipments anymore. This is Apache business. Territorial business. And Darius Holt has exceeded his authority, Rhea countered, her voice firm. As a landowner and taxpayer, I have standing to challenge him. You'd risk your name, your power, for Apache hostages? Talon asked, disbelief edged with urgency. I would defend the law against military overreach, she replied. And yes, I would stop the execution of innocent people, children included. Ashen watched openly now, astonished by the white woman's resolve. He spoke rapidly to Talon in Apache. The exchange was brief, tense. When Talon turned back, his expression had shifted. Ashen says a powerful white ally could change the balance, he admitted. But it puts you directly against Holt. He's not a man who forgives. I've faced men like him before, Rhea said calmly. And unlike you, I can walk through the front gate of Fort Buchanan without a rifle aimed at my back. The logic was undeniable. After a long moment, Talon nodded once. Then we plan carefully, he said. And we make sure none of us end up swinging from Holt's gallows. 3 days later, as the desert sunset bled amber and gold across the sky, Rhea Blackwell stood on the veranda of Fort Buchanan's headquarters. Below her, Frontier Dragoon soldiers escorted the Apache hostages onto the parade ground. Her negotiations with Darius Holt had been sharp, tense, and effective. You understand the terms, Mrs. Blackwell, Holt said, his voice tight with restrained irritation. You take full responsibility for these individuals. If they return to the reservation, you guarantee their compliance. If they disappear... I understand my responsibilities perfectly, Colonel, Rhea replied coolly, and I trust you understand that Governor Wilkins will receive my full report on how this situation was handled." The warning landed. Holt's jaw clenched, but he gave a curt nod. "The Army exists to protect civilians. I hope you don't regret your humanitarian impulses." Rhea revealed nothing as custody was formally transferred. Talon's uncle, the elder healer, studied her with eyes shaped by decades of survival. The two children clung to him, frightened but unbroken. "My wagon is ready," Rhea said gently. "We're leaving now." And for the first time since Holt's threat, the path forward, dangerous as it was, stood open. The road from Fort Buchanan to Iago Serrano's trading post passed in tight, watchful silence. Rhea Blackwell stayed alert, eyes constantly scanning for riders or signs of pursuit. She had arranged for Mace Turner to meet them partway with additional guards, trusted Blackwell hands who knew better than to question her choices. The escort served a dual purpose. To any observer, it reinforced the fiction that Rhea was returning the Apache to the reservation under her supervision. In truth, a far different plan had already been set in motion days earlier. When night finally settled over the desert, they reached the trading post, where Serrano himself waited, confirming that Rhea's private coach had been prepared exactly as requested. The exchange was swift and quiet. The freed hostages were transferred from the wagon into the enclosed carriage as fresh horses were hitched. "Everything is arranged, Senora," Serrano said in a low voice. "The supplies have been delivered as specified. Your agent at the Silver Queen carried out every transaction precisely." "Thank you, Iago," Rhea replied. "Your discretion won't be forgotten." When the coach rolled out, heading visibly toward Tucson, Rhea and Mace turned their party onto a different route, looping back through broken country unfamiliar to most patrols, but well known to those who had spent years moving along the territory's hidden paths. Miles from the post, in a secluded valley known only to the Obsidian Apache and a handful of trusted allies, Talon waited with Ashen and the core of his people. When Rhea arrived with the freed elders and children, the reunion was both joyful and restrained, a victory tempered by the knowledge that it offered only temporary relief. As the Apache gathered around their returned kin, Talon drew Rhea aside beneath the tall cottonwoods. "You kept your word," he said quietly. "Few white people ever have." "I'm not most white people," Rhea answered, a faint smile touching her lips. "And I had practical reasons, along with personal ones." Talon studied her by starlight. "The arrangement you proposed, the supply line through Serrano, you've already begun it." She nodded. "The first shipments of medicine and food are already moving toward the reservation. My foreman at the Silver Queen set up a shell company to handle the transactions. On paper, it's all legitimate. Equipment, provisions, mining supplies." "And the cost?" Talon asked. "Less than what I was losing to raids," Rhea replied evenly, "and far less than what a full-scale war would cost us all. Peace is good business, Talon." He smiled, hearing both the truth she spoke and the deeper reasons she didn't. "And Darius Holt?" he asked. "He'll be reassigned within the month," Rhea said with quiet satisfaction. "The territorial governor took a keen interest when I mentioned how hostage-taking might unsettle investors back east. New York and Boston don't care for bad headlines." Talon shook his head slowly. "You've done in days what we couldn't accomplish in years." "Different weapons," Rhea said. "Your raids kept your people alive. My methods may help them endure." They stood in silence, aware that together they had changed the balance of power in the territory, opening doors that had once seemed sealed shut. "What happens now?" Talon asked at last. The question carried far more weight than business alone. Rhea looked toward the fires where families reunited, then back to him. "That depends," she said softly, "on whether some boundaries can truly be crossed." Talon stepped closer, taking her hand in the darkness. Some already have. Society would never accept, Rhea began. I'm not asking society, Talon interrupted gently. I'm asking you. She drew a slow breath. There's land in northern Mexico, she said. I bought it years ago as an investment, a fertile valley, water rights secured, far from army patrols and tribal wars. Neutral ground, Talon said, understanding dawning. More than that, Rhea replied. A beginning. The C-Bar W can run under Mace. The Silver Queen earns enough to finance a trading company, legal, cross-border, supplies moving north, stability instead of bloodshed. Her vision sharpened as she spoke, and Talon listened, knowing that for the first time, the future offered something other than survival. It offered choice. Silver and cattle would move south, and at the heart of it all would stand a ranch where those caught between worlds could find refuge. The audacity of the idea lingered between them, a vision shaped by necessity, sharpened by business sense, and sustained by a human bond neither had planned. It honored both their worlds while daring to create something entirely new. It won't be easy, Talon warned, though a spark of hope lit his eyes. The border isn't a spell against hatred or danger. Nothing worth building ever is, Rhea Blackwell answered. But together, we might do what neither of us could alone. Together, he repeated, the word heavy with promise. When he drew her close, their kiss beneath the stars was no longer a stolen moment. It was a vow. To a shared future they would carve with the same resolve that had carried them through a brutal land. 6 months later, Rhea stood on the veranda of a hacienda tucked into a green valley 3 days' ride south of the border. Adobe and timber blended Mexican tradition with American comfort. Around it, a ranch was taking shape. Corrals, barns, and outbuildings raised by hands from both sides of the line. The trading company, registered in Tucson and Mexico City, had already earned a reputation as a reliable supplier of essential goods. Few knew its founder now lived at the southern headquarters, or that her partner was the man once whispered about as the Apache ghost. Talon stepped out to join her, his presence carrying a warmth that had only deepened through months of shared labor and quiet nights. No church or court marked their union, yet they lived as husband and wife in every way that mattered. The first families arrive tomorrow, he said, meaning the Obsidian Apache who had accepted sanctuary. Ashen reports they crossed without trouble. Mace Turner's shipment reached Hermosillo yesterday, Rhea replied. Everything's moving as planned. As the sun gilded the mountains, Rhea thought of the empire she'd left behind and the one rising here. The C-Bar W prospered under Mace's hand, its profits flowing into this new venture. The Silver Queen's output grew, fueling expansion. Yet greater than any ledger was the peace she'd found, with a man who crossed impossible boundaries to stand beside her. Together they had built a haven where difference meant strength, where the best of both worlds could endure. Any regrets? Talon asked softly. She turned to him, seeing the warrior's hard lines softened by purpose. In his eyes she found the same certainty steadying her own heart. Not one, she said, though I never imagined my life would lead here. To exile? He asked, a trace of his old dry humor. To home, she corrected, leaning into him as stars pricked the dark. Bright points in a borderless sky that, like their love, knew no lines and feared no frontiers. What they built together was not an empire of land or power, but of shared vision and mutual respect. They had found what each had sought on separate paths, not merely survival, but the courage to live fully, to love without permission, and to leave a legacy that might, in its small way, mend a divided land. As night settled over the valley, Rhea Blackwell and Talon stood on the edge of a future neither had dared to imagine. Proof that even in a world defined by borders, the human heart can find its way to freedom, connection, and home. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening and for allowing this story to speak to your heart. The Wild West still holds countless truths, some painful, some tender, all worth remembering. Stay with us, subscribe, comment, and invite others to discover these untamed stories. From our hearts to yours, thank you for being part of this journey. Aviso legal bara disclaimer. Each story shared here is produced for storytelling enjoyment. Certain scenes may include fictional or dramatized elements inspired by historical circumstances. Although AI tools assist us in visuals, narration, and script development, the emotional tone, editing, and quality control are conducted by people to ensure meaningful experiences. We fully uphold YouTube's policies, using no deceptive recreations or impersonations of real individuals. All creative resources are properly licensed. Unauthorized copying, re-uploading, or remixing is not permitted. Thank you for supporting the effort behind every episode we create.